movie will begin in 5 moments, the mindless voice announced. All those unseated will await the next show.
LA Woman was like coming home, and it was simple and bluesy and just, it was the bare bones, the essence of what we were about. And rock and roll was supposed to be out of a garage.
The record has that kind of a feel to it, you know. It's almost like a jam, you know. That was probably the most fun album to make.
Don't you love her face? Don't you love her as she's walking out the door?
1970. We had one last album to go, and this could be our last album. We're gonna make the album in this Zen moment in time. We didn't discuss the future. The future's uncertain. The end is always near.
Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm.
This was the album that wrapped it all up in a neat bow and presented the Doors' essence to you personally.
They found a unity that was exactly what they needed to show people, to show their audience that they still had what everyone originally loved them for.
Musically, I just think it holds up. It's, 40 years later, and it's still a fantastic record.
I'm telling you that right now there is a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid who is listening to the Doors for the first time as a new band and is getting his or her mind blown.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah.
We were a four-man band. I always thought of us as something like the modern jazz quartet of rock and roll.
Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
The Doors sunk themselves very deeply into the cultural history of not only rock and roll, but of the United States.
They had established themselves in the American consciousness. They had established themselves as special.
By the time we get to 69, the Doors had achieved probably continental notoriety.
Father, yes, son, I want to kill you.
We were just the filthy, dirty Doors.
I don't think they sought notoriety, but it sure did come to them.
Mother.
After all, where does the name The Doors come from? It comes from Aldous Huxley's book, The Doors of Perception. And that comes from a line by William Blake. If the doors of perception were cleansed, man would see things as they are, ... infinite.
Thank you, Mama! All night long! You ain't Mama! Gonna love you, baby, all night, yeah!
There was an entire new culture being born. It was called the counterculture, but we always thought it was the new culture to come. It was the culture of the 21st century.
They were working on an intellectual and lyrical level that was higher than most other people. And I mean, they were, to me, right up there with the Beatles and Dylan.
Jim led with his poetry. You know, he wasn't waving a flag and saying, "Follow me." He reached into your heart and your spine and shook you hard and made you figure out who you were and what mattered to you.
When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, tell me your name. Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game.
We consider ourselves more a mirror of society, you know. We were just commenting on what was going on.
There were more things to explore. It was just beginning. I thought, okay, we've done 3 albums in exactly the same setting, the same configuration. Let's bring in the horn players and the string players.
The idea of strings and horns was something Ray and I talked about before we even made our first album, because we love jazz. And it's something we wanted to experiment with and go through.
Come on, come on, come on, come on, now touch me, baby. Can't you see that I am not afraid? What was that promise that you made? Why won't you tell me what she said? What was that promise that you made?
They have success, they have hit records, they have records that people think are crap. You know, they've actually done, you know, the lifetime of experience compressed into less than 4 years. What they did first on Morrison Hotel and then on LA Woman was they went back to blues.
I'll keep your eyes on the road, you hand upon the wheel. Keep your eyes on the road, you hand upon the wheel. Yeah, we're going to the roadhouse, gonna have a good time.
They were a band appropriate to their times that were on the edge of whatever was happening. And the edge is the place you always want to be.
This is Changeling. This is the first song we recorded, and it turned out to be the first song on the album.
They come out with this great kick-ass rocker called the Changeling. And the first thing you hear Jim Morrison say is, "Get loose." Okay, I'm ready to get loose. Let's see what you got.
I think in a way it anticipates his leaving. You know, he's been through all this stuff. What else can you do as the singer in a rock band?
I live uptown, I live downtown, I live all around.
He's always talking about himself, that he's a changeling in that song. He's just expressing what was going to happen. He was telling everybody, this is it. You're going to see me change.
I had money, I had none, but I never been so broke that I couldn't leave town. I'm a changeling, see me change. I'm a change.
We had been shot down in the streets in Kent State. Bobby Kennedy was dead. Martin Luther King was dead. Our great leaders of peace had been assassinated. It was a terrible time.
The racial problems in the United States were reaching ahead, and in 1970 there was the invasion of Cambodia. That was the same year that LA Woman was made.
Vietnam was really heating up. We were trying to get out. There were riots in the streets. A madness had swept across America.
Jim felt that you change inside, and then that'll change the world. He was not too much on overt politics. But we were at the center of the cyclone.
The Changeling, to me, represented and spoke to all these things that we've been going through for the last few years, and the changes in America, and the fact that we were the Changeling.
Janis Joplin died later in the year, and Jimi Hendrix died later in the year, both of overdoses. And Jim was overdosing himself on his drug, which was alcohol.
But I never been so broke that I couldn't leave town.
Morrison, he'd been arrested. He had been in court. He'd been crazy drunk. He had all of the women that he probably could want. He had actually been through all of the things that a young man looking to take over the world aspires to.
They were providing a kind of soundtrack for not only the counterculture, but for a liberal consciousness that was in the process of growing and that they were part of.
Leads the album off, and what happens after the album is over with? He leaves town. He wasn't so broke that he had to stick around. He could leave everything behind him and attempt to find a new life in Paris, or perhaps his death.
Well, I've been down so goddamn long that it looks like up to me.
Been down so long, it looks like up to me. And that's what he sings in L.A. Woman on the album. He was feeling the full effect of the American justice system at a time when the American justice system had an axe to grind.
My whole life with the Doors, they were attacked by the establishment. There was a constant campaign to derail us.
Yeah, why don't one you people come on and set me free?
The Doors created terror in the hearts of America because here was this whole generation of kids that was standing up and saying, no, that's not okay with me. I have a position, I have a life, and there was no precedent for it.
Miami was definitely a turning point in the career of the Doors. What an insane night it was. Hot and sweaty, 14,000 people waiting for the Lizard King to come to Miami. Jim is a Florida boy. He was coming home from California.
You know, I was born here in this state. You know that? Yeah, I was born right here in Melbourne, Florida, in 1943. Then I got smart. Went out to a little city named Los Angeles.
And he could see it not as a performer or a fan, but almost as a, almost like a social scientist. The phenomenon of this engagement of a rock band and an audience. And what can I do with that? How can I mess with that?
You're all a bunch of slaves. Let people tell you what you're gonna do. How long are you gonna let them push you around? There are no rules. There are no laws. Do whatever you want to do. Do it.
And Jim finally said to them, he said, what do you want? What do you want from us? We're a rock and roll band. We play some pretty good songs, but you want something more, don't you?
Yeah. And you believe Jim Morrison was going to do whatever he talked about. And that was frightening to people.
Then Jim Morrison goes on to say, how about if I show you my cock? Is that what you want? And I'm going, oh my God, the guy is drunk. He's going to expose himself. We are in some deep shit here. This is going to be disastrous.
It was kind of torturing me because I had found my path in life and I loved music, and our singer had a pact with the devil.
You know, they came looking for a riot, and when they got one, really the biggest impact and the biggest fallout was on him.
He got busted for indecent exposure, public profanity, public drunkenness, and my favorite, simulation of oral copulation.
First the concert and then the after effect of the concert and then the trial weighed heavy on Jim's shoulders. He determined that he would turn it into a test case
What we're testing down there is the issue of artistic freedom of expression.
So he was found guilty on 2 counts, facing 3 years, perhaps less, a year and a half, in Rayford Penitentiary.
Jim was a free spirit. It was almost an insurmountable assault on his consciousness to threaten him with that.
The tour we had was canceled. We had a tour of 20 cities. Miami was city number 1.
We couldn't play anywhere. The Hall Owners Association had a big meeting and they banned us from most of the major halls in the United States.
It almost killed the band, and it probably killed Jim. It completely destroyed that thing that an artist has when they know they're making a difference and they're doing something, and then all of a sudden he's on the defensive.
Set me free.
Well, okay, we can't play. Let's just record.
I think going back into the studio was a way to get them refocused, because when they're in the studio, the reason why they came together in the first place is clearly obvious to them.
We get together at the Doors workshop on the corner of La Cienega and Santa Monica. The first question is, anybody got any songs? And sure enough, Jim and Robbie come through with a whole bunch of songs again, just like they always did.
The Doors had been in rehearsal, trying to get the new album together, what was to become the L.A. Woman album. I went to several rehearsals, and Jim especially was really bored. Couldn't really get himself up for it.
Paul was not happy, and when he left, the band was not happy, because he told them that he was not happy with the music, with what he had heard. And he walked out of that session. I understand later that he convened the band at Sunset Sound and listened again.
We played badly, played extremely badly. Riders on the Storm wasn't good.
Which Paul Rothschild thought sounded like cocktail music.
There was nothing there. You just couldn't get a good take of any kind of feel whatsoever.
I said, this album is going to be a disaster. One moment, I just got up, went into the studio, and said, hey, listen, I'm bored. First time in my life I've been in the studio and I've had my head down on the console. And I told him, hey, look, I love you guys and I love the music. But it seems to me that you're not turning me on and I'm not turning you on.
Paul went home. We all just stood around kind of in shock.
So we all decided, hey, we'll do it ourselves, you know. We know how to make records by now. We've done 5 of them. We got Bruce Botnick, who's probably the best engineer in town.
Jim then says, man, do we have to record here? I don't want to record here.
When I said, what about your rehearsal studio? Would that work? Rehearsal studio? I said, are you comfortable there? He said, we love it there.
It was the room we had rehearsed in forever. It had, our music was seeped into the walls. And so it was very comfortable. It was home.
Just seemed that they were cooking, working together. They were in the pocket all the time. They liked each other. They were getting along with each other. They just seemed happy.
And when they were playing downstairs and this stuff was just crackling, it was amazing to me. I was really excited about the new music.
We just did it like a garage band record. Now that was brilliant, and it worked exquisitely.
always used to love to do Crawling King Snake. It was one of our favorite John Lee Hooker songs. And, you know, I think we'd really meant to do it years before and never got around to it. So, and this being more of a bluesy album, was the perfect time for it.
That blues element of the Doors kept them somewhat grounded, yet they were able to turn it into an otherworldly event. So Crawling King Snake was kind of a call back to that roots that they loved.
Jim liked to think of himself as an old blues man. He was a big fan of Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and all those old blues guys, and he loved the truth and the songs and the rawness of it, and he related to it. And if he had had his choice, he would have done that all the time.
Crawling King Snake is a wonderful costume for Jim to wear. He's playing a part, he thinks, but he is also the part.
Invariably, Robbie Krieger would have something. A genius, the Doors' secret weapon. The man would always have something. And he'd say, yeah, I got one, it's called Love Her Madly. Love her madly, like Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington would always say at the end of a concert, we love you madly. Robbie picks that up and twists a little bit, make Love Her Madly. Plays it on the guitar.
Don't you love her madly? Don't you need her badly? Don't you love her way? Tell me what you say. Don't you love her madly? Wanna be her daddy? Don't you love her as she's walking out the door?
I knew that Love Her Madly, when it happened, was a hit. I just knew it, and we all knew it.
I was fooling around on a 12-string guitar, and the melody just kind of came to me. At the time, my girlfriend, who later became my wife, Lynn, every time we had an argument, she used to get pissed off and go out the door, and she'd slam the door so loud, and the whole house would shake, you know? So that's where I got the line, as she's walking out the door.
A minor. Tempos like this. And I've got it. And then Jim starts to sing.
Don't you love her madly? Don't you need her badly?
Robbie, again, underestimated. You know, not only as a guitar player, but as a songwriter. Look at all the hits he wrote, Light My Fire, Love Her Madly, Love Me Two Times, Tell All the People.
Don't you love her face? Don't you love her as she's walking out the door? Like she did 1,000 times before. Don't you love her ways? Tell me what you say. Don't you love her as she's walking out the door?
Don't you love her madly as she's walking out the door? What a great line. Of course you do. You know, I don't ever want to see you again. We're done. Oh, wait a minute.
And I hear, oh, God, I can put a Vox. I'll put the Vox Continental right in here. Seven horses seem to be on the mark.
the Doors' greatest strength as songwriters, is that they didn't think of themselves as individual writers coming in with their bit. They thought of themselves as a songwriting band.
I thought it was a little too commercial, you know, for the first single.
There was a very special advantage to my not being at the sessions. I got my own first blush reactions to things. And when the hair stands up at the back of my neck on a song, that's when I pay attention to, and it happened for Love Her Madly.
That was the first time we tried playing with another guitar player, with a rhythm guitar player. We wanted to feel live, you know. So we figured, okay, we'll get this guy Mark Benno, and he just kind of played the perfect you know, rhythm stuff, which allowed me to go ahead and play my leads at the same time.
And Bruce Botnick brings in Jerry Sheff, Elvis Presley's bass player.
Jim just lit up like he was happy as a camper. He says, Elvis Presley's bass player? Me? You play with us? I said, yeah. So I called Jerry and he said, absolutely, I'd love to do it.
And just did some brilliant stuff, man. That bass line on L.A. Woman, holy cow.
L.A. Woman, in some respects, is film noir, rock and roll film noir. I remember going downtown L.A. when you just drove down there and walked the streets, and it smelled like one of those old black and white film noir movies.
For me, a Los Angeles native, it's our anthem. You know, what describes LA better than LA Woman? Answer, nothing.
It was the quintessential expression of what living in California was like.
You know, women took him in and fed him. But women fed him in many different ways, not only with food, but with support, with sex, with emotion, with booze. And he was thanking them in this song, but he was leaving them, all of them. And he was leaving the city that he loved.
City of Night is a reference to John Ritchie's great Los Angeles homosexual novel, great novel called City of Night. So he's got his literary reference in there, another lost angel in the City of Night. Wow, you know, just lyrics were so good. They were so Raymond Chandler, so Nathaniel West, so 1930s, 40s, dark, seamy side of Los Angeles. A place where Jim would easily go.
I think here we go with the raised piano solo. Yes. And this was an overdub. But how it works perfectly with his Wurlitzer piano.
Cooper's band, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, they play a song called Day in the Country. This is I played Day in the Country.
I think he liked that part of LA, that you could be a stranger in LA. You could hide behind a beard and get away with it, even though you were a rock star.
I see your hair is burning. Hills are filled with fire.
I see your hair is burning. hills are filled with fire. That's what poetry is. In a very few words, you create this entire world.
This guy who had words, they were so percussive. I immediately heard rhythms.
And here's John drums. You hear what he's doing. This is all on one track. I mean, we had to make decisions on those days. It was all recorded on 8-track. So we locked it in. This is how they're locked together, John and Jerry Sheff.
Great player, great feel. Drummers and bass players are brothers in the basement, cooking up the groove. They're bonded.
Motel money, better madness. But ain't a move to glad to sadness.
And then Morrison says a classic line, an anagram of his name. Jim Morrison, play with the letters, turn them around and move them around, and you come up with Mr. Mojo Rising.
Mr. Mojo Rising.
It was that quality of being stronger than everything around you and of climbing up out of that. You know, Mr. Mojo Rising, it's a brilliant image. And it comes from blues. I got my mojo working. Muddy Waters, Willie Dixon.
Mojo was a blues term for sexuality. And so I thought, well, what if I slowly increase the tempo like an orgasm?
And listen to this scream from Jim. He was obviously having fun, enjoying himself.
Yeah, it was like the energy level in the room just went from here to, whoa, overhead. We're operating up here. Energy is up here. Doors operated up there between the four of us quite a lot.
The song LA Woman, that was totally put together in the studio just from sitting around jamming and, you know. So I always say that's the quintessential Doors song because of the way we wrote it.
Here comes Robbie Solo.
You need to be in a car with that on 10 and screaming down the freeway in Los Angeles listening to LA Woman, you'll get that song.
LA Woman, you know, the metaphor of the city as a woman is brilliant. Cops and Cars, Never Saw a Woman So Alone. I mean, this is just great stuff. It's metaphoric. He's looking at the physicality of the town and thinking of her, and we need to take care of her. It's my hometown, so let's nurture the LA woman.
I want to tell you about Texas radio and the big beat. It comes out of the Virginia swamps, cool and slow, with a backbeat narrow and hard to master. Some call it heavenly in its brilliance, others mean and rueful of the Western dream. I love the friends I have gathered together on this thin raft. We've constructed pyramids in honor of our escaping. For this is the land where the Pharaoh died.
Texas Radio, the Big Beat. Jim used to recite that as poetry
Children,
in concert, but he didn't have
the river
the little
contains
bridges
specimens.
that he sang. And I remember Ray saying, hey, what about Texas Radio? You know, we've never really done
They
it.
are saying, forget the night. Live with us in forests of azure. Meager food for souls forgot.
You know, that was that thing about Morrison all the time. It wasn't so much about the music, but about what this guy represented. What was he talking about? What was he trying to say? What was he trying to tell us?
I want to tell you about Texas Radio and the Big Beat.
With Jim eating his microphone.
Comes out of the Virginia swamps, cool and slow with plenty of precision, and a backbeat narrow and hard to master.
I'm going to solo John and Jim so you can hear how they're working together.
Some call it heavenly in its brilliance, others mean and rueful of the Western dream. I love the friends I have gathered together in this thin raft. We have constructed pyramids in honor of our escaping. This is the land where the Pharaoh died.
This is a great example of a song starting as a seed and flowering and becoming a complete song and not doing it over a period of days.
It was a poem, and this lick, da-da-da, boom, 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 da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. I don't know why. I kept the beat. But then I decided to follow the melody with my snare drum.
Lost of God, I'll tell you about the hopeless night. Meager food for souls forgot. I'll tell you about the maiden with wrought iron soul.
You know, those stations in Mexico, they used to broadcast across the border. Wolfman Jack was broadcasting from south of the border across the South and playing wild R&B and Howlin' at the Moon. And these would have been things that a lot of kids Jim's age would have heard.
Let me tell you about Texas Radio on the Big Beat, the Negroes of the forest. That scene that he paints is so primal.
The Negroes in the forest, brightly feathered, and they are saying, forget the night, live with us in forests of azure. Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Man, that is one of the greatest lines ever written. Because when you are stoned and you are out there on the perimeter, you are immaculate. This is psychedelics we're talking about. This is expanding one's consciousness. This was a journey to become immaculate.
Jim's life was poetry. With all of the tumult, the lack of rhyme, the freestyle that life has.
I don't think there was a better poet of Jim's age, of Jim's time.
Now listen to this, I'll tell you about Texas. I'll tell you about Texas Radio. I'll tell you about the hopeless night. Wander in the western dream. Tell you about the maiden with wrought iron soul.
Near the end of the mixing, Jim said that he wanted to go to Paris.
In one of my photos of the recording studio, there's a chalkboard. And written on that chalkboard are the words, a clean slate. Jim needed a clean slate.
I think that was his gift to the band. He could go do what he wanted to do if he worked with them on this next album, which I think he thought would be his last.
He said, I'm going to Paris. And we said, what? You're not finished yet, man. We're not finished with the record. We haven't mixed all the songs. He said, everything is fine, man. I've done all my vocals. You guys are doing fine. It's sounding great. I'm going to go to Paris with Pam.
I did not really think, especially after I said goodbye to Jim, that he would ever come back as a member of any band.
There's no question Jim announced he was resigning. He was going to be a writer. And it wasn't, I'll never talk to you again. It wasn't hostile. It was, this is what I'm going to go do with my life. And we'll see what happens.
You know, obviously, he was kind of messed up, and we said, hey, man, great, you know, do what you have to do. And, you know, when you come back, we'll worry about this, you know. So, I mean, it sounded like a good idea to us. Fortunately, it didn't turn out that way.
And off he went to Paris. And I never saw him again. That was it. I never saw him again. I never even talked to him again. He was only over there like 3-4 months.
We're all riders on the storm. I think that's everybody who has had vicissitudes in life, love in life, disappointments, never knowing exactly what's going to happen next, facing everything, a kind of bravery that we all have just to be alive. It's not easy out there.
Riders on the Storm, a little more jazzy, darker, has that melancholy, but it has that rolling feel of a band playing together.
Riders on the storm, riders on the storm, into this house we're born. Like a dog without a bone and actor out on loan. Riders on the storm. There's a killer on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad. Take a long holiday. Let your children play. If you give this man a ride, sweet family will die. Killer on the road.
Riders has this mood. It originally came from us jamming on this Ghost Riders in the Sky. Da-dum, 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 da-dum.
An old cowpoke went riding out one dark and windy day. Upon a ridge he rested as he went along his way. When all at once a mighty herd of red-eyed cows he saw, plowing through the ragged skies and up a cloudy draw.
And we're jamming, and it's got this sort of Western Clint Eastwood mood, you know.
And from there, it kind of morphed into more of like a... And it kind of turned into Riders on the Storm. And Jim changed the words from Ghost Riders in the Sky to Riders on the Storm.
I said, wait, okay, that's great, man. Riders on the Storm. We can't do Vaughn Monroe, the old cowpoke riding out one dark and windy day. So I said, let me see what I can do with this. And here's what I came up with. We got to put some jazz to it, make it dark. And sure enough, this is what happened.
There's a killer on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad.
chef says, "What's the bass line?" I said, "Like simple. E minor, A major." He said, "Oh man, that's impossible." I said, "What, for you?"
And here's Jerry Chef by himself. And he's basically playing what Ray would have played on his left hand if he was playing a piano bass, but with some latitude, because what Ray could play with his left hand couldn't always translate into a bass. So like those little slides.
At this point, singing this vocal, he knew that he was going to Paris. And he was singing his love to Pam.
Girl, you gotta love your man. Girl, you gotta love your man. Take him by the hand. Make him understand. The world on you depends. Our life will never end. Gotta love your man. Yeah.
And here's Ray's solo. You can hear it. He was taken direct, which means he wasn't playing through an amplifier, and it was just direct injection into the console.
More thunder, bring in the thunder.
The loneliness that that song conjures up about how we are here in this torment that we call the world, trying to keep our heads above the fray, above the surf, above the storm.
That whisper voice that's just singing, "Riders on the Storm." You can hear that in the last two Riders on the Storm. That's Jim's spirit whispering to us from the ether, whispering to us from the beyond.
The cars hiss by my window like the waves down on the beach.
My last message to Jim after he'd gone to Paris, I told him I had just quit drinking and it was time for him to quit too.
But he sounded lonely and distant, as if it wasn't panning out for him. And maybe it was the cycle of alcoholism again had re-entered his life there.
But she's out of reach. Headlight to my window, shining on the wall.
Jim went in to take a hot bath, and she describes finding him the next morning. She'd gone to sleep, and he had died in the bathtub on his back. She said he was smiling. I'm glad to hear that.
When I heard, I didn't believe it, because he just seemed like this Irish drunk who was going to party till 80.
Jim was so larger than life, you know, the way he was. I couldn't imagine him dead.
We knew from the gravity of the reports from Paris and hearing from Bill Siddons, the manager who had gone there to help to arrange the burial, that this is all too real.
Phone rang Monday morning at 4:30, And my wife, Sherry, sat bolt upright when the phone started ringing and said, "Jim's dead." And I looked at her and went, "What?" And I answered the phone, and it was Clive Selwood, our label manager in the UK, telling me that 3 different journalists had called him and told him that Jim had died. And I got a 3:30 plane and was in Paris at 6:30 the next morning. I just held her for a minute, and the coffin was in the living room. I literally spent hours with Pamela just talking. And she said he told me when he was there, when he died, he wanted to be buried in Père Lachaise. I just thought it was beautiful that he even knew enough that that's where he might want to be buried, and I thought it was there was something completely right about doing this. And I was absolutely clear, having been through a number of press debacles in my life, that the best thing we could do is not tell anybody. We're going to do it our way. We're going to bury a poet.
Well, I lost the best writing partner anybody's ever had. I mean, it was our whole life that was gone,
I loved playing music to his words, and that's what I miss terribly. I don't miss the self-destruction. In his case, they went hand in hand.
Whenever we lose a creative person, we lose something that could be added to the culture to make the culture richer and brighter. And I think with Jim's death, one of the lights of the 60s went out.
Hyacinth House was the loneliest song Jim ever wrote. What are they doing in the Hyacinth House to feed the lions these days? I need a brand new friend who doesn't bother me, who doesn't need me.
What are they doing in the Hyacinth House? What are they doing in the Hyacinth House to please the lions? Yeah, this day. I need a brand new friend who doesn't trouble me. I need someone, yeah, who doesn't need me.
I don't want to have friends that need me. I don't want to have people around me who are leaning on me. It's too heavy. I'm only 27 years old. Let me go. I need a new friend who doesn't need me. Is he referring to his main squeeze? Or is he referring to his friends like me? Is he referring to the band? I think he's referring to everybody. I think he's saying, let me go. Let me be somebody else.
To be frank, the last few years of his life, there were several friends he was hanging with that were kind of, idolizing him and didn't discourage his substance abuse. So, were those friends?
Losing, some of the people, the hangers-on who were dragging him down. If you hang out with drinkers and drug takers, it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily getting French symbolist poets. You get kind of like creeps and weirdos.
Here's a chance for me to quote one of my fellow people from a man from Poland, Mr. Chopin. So I'm doing a little Chopin Polonaise, my solo. And Jim sings.
And I'll say it again. I need a brand new friend.
I I spent a fair amount of time hanging out in the studio with them, and they were having a good time.
There were wonderful songs. The Changeling was kind of a tribute to James Brown. Lover Madly was clearly the single. So I knew I had a single for AM radio, and then I knew I had LA Woman and Riders on the Storm for FM radio. Those were guaranteed. It was a terrific record.
If you're going to have an epitaph, if you're going to have one last record, then that was the record to make.
The Doors are a living entity. When I play them tonight, they will mean something to my audience. That music speaks to you and me, and it speaks to kids, and it speaks to people older than us.
It was an incredible statement of how strong they were as a band and what a unique and extraordinary partnership they were.
You can feel the warmth and the liveness of it, you know. It was really our most spontaneous album.
Jim got empowered by us producing LA Woman ourselves, you know, and we all did, because we made all the decisions, and it was inspiring.
I don't think that imagination, inspiration, beauty, at a high spiritual level ever go out of style. Whether it's Bach, or Scriabin, or The Doors. And people are still listening to all of them.
His world on you depends. Our life will never end. The ultimate statement, our life will never end. And the ancient Egyptians used to say that if you say a man's name, he is alive. So I take this opportunity to say Jim Morrison.
Suburb.